What if everything we've been told about UFOs is wrong? What if these so-called aliens aren't visitors from faraway planets, but something far darker? Something that's been walking among us for millennia? What if UFOs are not extraterrestrial at all, but extra-dimensional spiritual beings, demons in disguise?
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
And some things that should not have been forgotten were lost.
Man shall be ruled by law, not by the will of other men.
What is it? An ark. To hold the innocent. And the Creator sends his deluge to wipe out the wicked from this world.
The Lord of hosts will do battle for us. Behold his mighty hand.
In this episode, we're going to experience 4 different stories, from the skies of ancient Jerusalem to the vast emptiness of space, to see if we can prove the shocking theory that UFOs and aliens are actually spiritual entities, ancient and powerful forces hiding in plain sight. Why have these beings been manipulating humanity for thousands of years? And why are we finally waking up to the truth? Flavius Josephus stood atop the ancient walls of Jerusalem, his gaze piercing the smoke-filled air that hung to the city's ruins. Only 40 years had passed since the Son of God had walked down the very street below, but it felt like ages ago. The siege of Jerusalem had been raging for weeks, and the weight of impending doom pressed down upon him. The Roman legions encircled the city like a snake, coiling tighter with every passing day. But today, something else weighed heavily on the hearts of the city's defenders. Something more terrifying, more inexplicable than the sound of war drums or the clash of swords. A darkness hung in the sky, suffocating in its heaviness, and the heavens themselves seemed to tremble with the coming of something far beyond human understanding. It was near dusk when it began, a sight that would burn into Josephus's memory for the rest of his days. At first, it was but a shimmer, like the faintest flicker of light, barely perceptible against the growing twilight. But as the minutes passed, it intensified, swirling into a fiery maelstrom. Josephus could feel it, the pulse of power in the air, the unsettling certainty that the world was about to be undone. Then, with a flash, figures appeared, strange, otherworldly, and impossibly vast, descending from the heavens in a furious, luminous array. These were no mere birds or streaks of light. The sky was filled with chariots of fire, armed battalions and spectral warriors racing across the expanse above Jerusalem. They moved with a purpose of clarity of intent that shook Josephus to his core. The metallic clamor of battle echoed in his ears, the roaring clash of armies in the air, the sound of thousands of soldiers fighting in celestial conflict, reverberated through his bones. Josephus gripped the stone edge of the tower, his heart pounding in his chest. "What is this?" he whispered to himself, his voice drowned beneath the roar of those divine legions. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. But words failed him. He had seen his share of conflict and war during his travels, but nothing like this. Was this a sign from the gods? Was it the end? And then, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, suddenly broke through the tumult, its words clear and unmistakable. Josephus's blood froze as he heard the words echo across the city, carried by an invisible wind that swept through the streets like a final breath before death. We are departing. The words hung in the air like an eternal decree. The figures in the sky paused, and for a moment the world held its breath. The clash of arms ceased, the sky darkened as the chariots and battalions seemed to withdraw, pulling away from the city as if by command. Their departure was as sudden as their arrival. As quickly as they had come, they vanished into the blackening sky, leaving only the unsettling silence behind. Josephus's mind reeled. He had spent his life chronicling the wars of men, but this was beyond anything mortal. These were not the hands of soldiers or the fury of kings. These were the forces of heaven, or perhaps the forces of judgment, sweeping through the skies above Jerusalem. He looked upon the city, now eerily quiet in the aftermath of the vision, the weight of the voice lingering in his ears. They were departing. Was this divine retribution for the sin of the people, the rebellion against the will of God? Or had he, Josephus, witnessed something else, a final warning, a sign that God had withdrawn his presence from the city, leaving it to its fate? As the soldiers below him shouted and the fires of war burned brighter, Josephus fell to his knees. His heart trembled, not from the fear of the Romans, but from the overwhelming realization that the Jerusalem's fate was sealed. The judgment had come from above, and no mortal force could stop it. The chariots of heaven had left. Jerusalem was now alone. Hans had always been an early riser. The smell of the cold morning air, mingling with the scent of wood smoke from the hearth, greeted him as he pushed open the small window of his workshop. The sky outside was still wrapped in the dusky embrace of dawn, the world quiet, save for the chirping of the birds. It was an April morning like any other in Nuremberg, unremarkable, a quiet peace before the inevitable bustle of the day. But as he stepped out of his small stone house, stretching the weariness from his bones, something caught his eye, something that made his pulse quicken. It was the light, the way the clouds were bending, twisting into shapes no natural storm could create. He paused, the weight of his chisels and his tools forgotten in his hands. Something was different. The air grew heavy, and a thick fog seemed to roll in, almost as if the earth itself was exhaling. A strange hum, faint but unmistakable, vibrated through the cobblestone beneath his boots. At first, it was nothing more than a whisper in the wind, but it grew louder, rising like the war drums of an ancient battle. And then, all at once, the sky itself seemed to split open. The clouds churned violently, swirling into a chaotic vortex. Hans staggered back, his heart racing in his chest as flying objects, great and terrible shapes, appeared, as if born from the storm itself. What he saw, he could barely comprehend. Bright, blood-red spheres, shining with an eerie, unnatural light, danced across the sky. The spheres moved with precision as though guided by a will not of this world. But it wasn't just the spheres. There were other shapes, elongated tubes, long as the town's towers, twisting through the air like writhing serpents. And there were crosses, too, great flaming crosses that shimmered in the clouds, their brilliant glow lighting up the whole sky. They appeared as though drawn from the heavens themselves, their forms both magnificent and terrifying. Hans could hardly breathe, his eyes wide as the scene unfolded. Battles, like something from the pages of history, raged in the heavens above him. The spheres collided in midair with the tubes, sparks flying from the violent clashes. The sound was deafening, the roar of invisible armies waging war above the city. Metallic shrieks echoed in the air like the cry of 1,000 swords clashing. The earth seemed to vibrate with the force of it. Flashes of light blazed as though the sun itself had burst into flames. Hans stood, his legs unsteady, his mind struggling to even grasp the significance of what he had witnessed. Just before the final silence fell, a new terror emerged. A colossal black-pointed spear high above the city, cutting through the smoke and light like a blade. It hovered silently, almost reverently, as it delivered the final blow to human understanding. It lingered unnaturally still, before vanishing in a blink, as though it had never been there at all. His hand trembled as he reached for his ink and quill. The sky had shown its fury, but this was no ordinary celestial event. No, it was a divine warning. He felt it in the very marrow of his bones. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, there was silence. The spheres and crosses began to descend, falling like stars, some crashing into distant hills. Hans thought for a moment that the end of the world had come. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble, and he fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the sheer awe and terror of what he had witnessed. Later, as the town slowly returned to normal activity, the sun rose above the distant hills. Hans could not shake the feeling that something had shifted. The people of Nuremberg were in shock, unable to even make sense of what they had just witnessed. The battle in the sky was not just a dream, nor a vision. It was a message. In the days that followed, Hans would etch the scene into a broadsheet, a record of the battle in the heavens. The people needed to see, to understand. Hans wrote these final words: God, the merciful Father, send us signs so that we may mend our lives. Was this a warning of judgment? As he prepared his etching for print, Hans knew one thing for certain. God had spoken, and nothing would ever be the same again. You know, throughout history, some of the most fascinating and thought-provoking moments have happened behind the scenes, in the inner circles. From the councils of ancient empires to the Last Supper, from secret plots against kings to quiet grassroots rebellions. What happens in secret often matters most. So that's why I created a place for our own inner circle over on Patreon. It's where the most dedicated members of this channel gather to go deeper down the rabbit holes, help shape future topics, and see raw, unfiltered behind-the-scenes episodes you won't find anywhere else. So meet us there, join the council, and see for yourself why what happens in secret changes everything. The year was 1984, and the vast expanse of space seemed to stretch forever, an abyss of blackness dotted with distant stars. For the Soviet cosmonauts aboard the Salyut 7 space station, the daily rhythms of life in orbit were the same. Routine maintenance, research, and long stretches of silence broken only by the hum of the station's machinery. But on day 155 of their mission, something happened that would change their understanding of the universe forever. As the space station floated high above Earth's surface, the crew went about their usual tasks. Suddenly, a bright orange light began to envelop the station, brighter than any star they had ever seen, casting an eerie glow against the dark expanse of space. For a moment, the light seemed to hold them captive, as if the very atmosphere of space itself was shifting. The cosmonauts felt a strange stillness, a profound sense of weightlessness, not in gravity, but in the presence of something that defied reason. Commander Oleg Atkov was the first to notice it. His breath caught in his throat as he peered through the observation porthole. What he saw sent a jolt through his body, a sight unlike any he had ever expected in the cold, mechanical realm of space. 7 towering figures appeared before them, suspended in the vacuum. These were no ordinary celestial bodies or distant stars. They were enormous, radiant beings with human-like faces. Their features were serene, their expressions glowing with an unmistakable peace. But it wasn't just their faces that stunned them. It was their wings that seemed to shimmer with light, casting halos around their heads. These creatures appeared to be flying alongside the station, effortlessly keeping pace, as if they were accompanying the crew in their celestial journey. Their wings spread wide, golden and translucent, fluttering with an energy that could not be described by mere words. Each being was encased in a brilliant glow of luminous aura that filled the cabin with a divine radiance. The cosmonauts, stunned into silence, watched in awe. They had expected to witness the vastness of the cosmos, the emptiness of space, but this was a visitation of the divine, something that no earthly science could explain. For 10 minutes, the beings hovered outside the station as though acknowledging their presence, but before slowly fading away into the vastness of the universe. The silence that followed was deafening, and the crew stood still, their hearts racing, their minds unable to fully grasp what had just unfolded before their eyes. Days passed, and the cosmonauts tried to shake the memory of what they had seen, but the strange occurrence was not over. 12 days later, as a new spacecraft docked on the station, the same bright orange light returned. The crew, now consisting of 6 members, rushed to the portholes once again, and there they were, the 7 beings, angelic and majestic, once more appearing in the void of space. This time, the beings seemed to be greeting the new arrivals, their serene faces glowing with a peaceful smile. The crew watched in awe as the angelic figures kept their vigil, silently moving in formation alongside the station, their wings gently flapping in a slow, harmonious rhythm. After a brief moment, the angels vanished into the infinite void as mysteriously as they had come. Back on Earth, Soviet authorities, alarmed by the reports, quickly classified the incident. Strict orders were issued. The cosmonauts were forbidden from speaking publicly about what they had witnessed. The presence of such celestial beings was too profound, too disruptive to the narrative of scientific exploration. The government sought to control the story to keep the supernatural away from the public eye. But secrets rarely stay buried. In 1985, leaked accounts surfaced, spreading like wildfire through the West. The world learned of the Salyut 7 incident, and the story of the space angels became a sensational mystery discussed in whispered tones and paranormal circles. Was it a divine visitation, or perhaps just an elaborate hoax? The debate raged on, but for the cosmonauts, the truth was clear. They had seen something that could not be explained by physics, by science, or by any human understanding of the universe. They had seen something celestial. As the years passed, the memory of the angels remained with them. For some, it was a moment of clarity, a glimpse into a world beyond the stars. For others, it was a testament to the unfathomable nature of the universe, a reminder that just beyond the limits of human knowledge, the divine waits to make itself known in ways that words can never fully capture. And so, the cosmonauts of Salyut 7 returned to Earth, their eyes forever changed, their souls touched by the mysterious and the sacred, by the angels in space. Kathy Land had always been drawn to the skies. As a child, growing up in the flat, endless stretches of Florida, she'd lie on her back in the grass, eyes wide, staring at the stars. There was something about the distant twinkling of the night sky that pulled at her, an itch for the unknown, a longing to understand what lay beyond the veil of Earth. She had spent years poring over books, watching documentaries, and diving deep into the mysterious world of UFOs. But what Kathy didn't know, what no one could have prepared her for, was that her fascination with the stars would soon turn into a nightmare. From a young age, Kathy began experiencing strange episodes, unexplained missing time, and vivid, terrifying dreams. But it wasn't until adulthood that the true horror began. Late one night, in the still, suffocating silence of her bedroom, Kathy was jolted awake by an icy, suffocating presence. She blinked her eyes open, heart pounding in her chest, only to be confronted by the horrifying sight of a face just inches from hers, its features alien, grotesque, and cold. The being's large black eyes seemed to bore into her soul, the inhuman face looming above her with a predatory calmness. The room was suffocatingly still, and in that moment, Kathy couldn't move. A second, smaller entity, like a shadow beside the first, was pinning her down, its small claw-like hands gripping her legs as though preparing to draw her from the bed. She could feel the weight of its presence, the unnatural coldness pressing against her, as if its very touch was draining the warmth from her body. Kathy tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. Panic surged through her body as she struggled to break free, her body trapped beneath an invisible force, her mind screaming for escape. The sensation was overwhelming, like a dream, but far too vivid, too real. Then just as suddenly as it had begun, the beings vanished. The pressure lifted and Kathy was left gasping for breath, trembling in a cold sweat, alone in her bed. Her heart thudded in her chest, the room now eerily silent. She lay there for what felt like an eternity, too frightened to move, too bewildered to process what had just happened. What were they? Why had they come? And why, despite her terror, had they left so suddenly, as if caught off guard? The next morning, still shaken to her core, Kathy recounted the horrifying encounter to her adult son. As the words tumbled out of her, she saw his face shift, confusion giving way to calm realization. "Mom, those weren't aliens. Those are demons." The words hit Kathy like a thunderclap. Demons? That was the last thing she had expected to hear. But in that instant, everything clicked. The bizarre episodes of missing time, the strange sensations of being watched, the terrifying visions, it all fit together. She felt as though a heavy fog had lifted from her mind. Suddenly, the experiences she had long brushed off as alien encounters now made sense in a whole new light. She spent the following weeks in a daze, searching for answers, trying to piece together the fragments of her past. She turned to the internet, reading testimony after testimony of others who had endured similar experiences, and what she found was both surprising and disturbing. Many others had come to the same conclusion. What had been labeled as UFO abductions were, in fact, encounters with malevolent spiritual beings, demons who used the guise of aliens to manipulate and terrify their victims. Kathy's heart began to change. She no longer saw herself as a victim of an otherworldly phenomenon. She was, in fact, a soldier in a spiritual battle. Armed with a newfound understanding that she had been under the influence of the demonic forces, Kathy's fear began to turn into anger, a righteous fury that surged through her veins. The deception had lasted long enough. It was time to take a stand. With the guidance of her new Christian faith community, Kathy learned that the power of Jesus Christ was the key to ending the torment. It wasn't a question of running or hiding. It was about facing the darkness with unwavering faith. Armed with prayer and the authority of Christ, Kathy began to claim back her life, her mind, her body, and her spirit. For the first time in years, Kathy was able to sleep without fear. The weight that had pressed down on her heart was gone, and in its place was a quiet peace, knowing that she had confronted the true nature of her tormentors and won. Her testimony is one of profound transformation, an awakening to the spiritual war that had waged in the unseen realms, a war that no amount of UFO research could have prepared her for. Kathy had finally broken free from the grip of the alien demons, not by fleeing, but by standing firm in her faith and claiming the victory that was already hers through Christ. And now she speaks to others who are lost in the confusion of their own encounters. She shares her story with anyone who will listen, reminding them that the truth is far stranger than they might have ever imagined. But with God's power, they too can find freedom. No demon, no alien can stand against the authority of Jesus Christ. And with that truth, Kathy walks forward, no longer afraid of the darkness, but ready to shine the light of truth into it. These stories aren't isolated. From Jerusalem to outer space to small-town Florida, people are seeing the same things, experiencing the same horrors, and finding the same solution: spiritual authority in the name of Jesus Christ. What if the answers we seek to the unknown aren't buried in classified government documents, but instead hidden in the stories and lessons of our Bible? What if the entities we call aliens are the same beings that ancient texts warned us about, spirits of deception masquerading as beings of light? The patterns here are too clear to ignore. The manipulation of the mind, tampering with the human flesh, lies disguised as enlightenment, and always a lingering fear that vanishes in the name of Christ. The veil is lifting, and now you have to ask yourself, are these alien visitors here to help or to lead us further from the truth? You're going to have to decide that for yourself, but know this, there is power in the truth, and there is freedom in the name of Christ. You do not need to live in fear. You need to live in awareness. Be grounded in truth, be rooted in the Word, and be bold enough to call out deception when you see it. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and please share it around with someone who needs to hear it. As always, you can follow the channel and everything I do behind the scenes on Instagram, X, and TikTok at Glory Concealed. And for exclusive content, updates, and kind of behind-the-scenes features, you can support the mission over on Patreon and help us dig deeper into the mysteries that they don't want uncovered. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and never stop seeking the truth.